Okay, so you know how it feels like everywhere you turn these days, it's just conflict after conflict?
Yeah, totally. Like, it's almost like we've forgotten how to, like, disagree without it turning into some kind of huge fight.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
It's arguments everywhere you look,
Right.
right? Disagreements, battles of opinion.
Oh, yeah.
But what if there was a better way to do it? That's what we're looking at today. We're diving into President Nelson's speech, Peacemakers Needed.
Oh, interesting.
He gave this speech at a religious conference actually earlier this year. And while, obviously the context is faith-based, the insights are surprisingly relevant, I think, for like anyone who is trying to improve their communication and relationships, especially in our world today,
Yeah, I think a lot more people could use a little bit more peacemaking these days.
for sure.
Yeah.
And it's so interesting how he kicks things off. He starts with a story about his time as a surgical intern.
Okay, I'm intrigued. What kind of story?
Just imagine this. Okay. So you're in the operating room, tensions are high,
Yeah, I can imagine in that environment it would be really stressful.
and then a surgeon throws a contaminated scalpel at him.
What?
Yeah. So,
Wow, that's a very intense way to start a speech about peacemaking.
yeah, that was my thought too.
So, what's the connection there? Why start with such a dramatic story?
Well, he's drawing a parallel. He's saying words can be just as dangerous as that scalpel,
Yeah.
that they can wound and spread negativity, just like, a contaminated instrument would.
Oh, that's a powerful image.
And the thing is, he's not just talking about like big political debates or, online arguments,
Oh, so he's not just talking about Twitter.
not just Twitter.
Mm.
He's concerned about how we talk to each other like every single day, even in our close personal relationships.
Oh, so he's really taking this down to a personal level.
Yeah, he's talking about all those little interactions. And, I think a lot of people can relate to that concern, right? This decline of civility. He calls it this rise of vulgarity, fault-finding, and evil speaking. And how often do you see people just resort to insults and personal attacks instead of actually engaging in a respectful dialogue?
Oh, all the time, unfortunately. Especially
For
online.
sure. It's almost like we've just forgotten how to disagree without being disagreeable.
I know what you mean. It's like people are just looking for a fight these days.
And he doesn't let anyone off the hook.
Yeah.
He calls out specific behaviors.
Really? Like what?
So things like belittling your spouse or your kids,
Oh, wow.
those angry outbursts that we all have. Right.
Uh.
And then later we regret them.
Oh, for sure. I know I've been guilty of that myself.
Right. And then things like giving people the silent treatment or bullying or spreading rumors about people at work.
It's amazing the kinds of things that we sometimes think are okay.
And what's really striking, he doesn't just say this is rude or it's unpleasant. He's saying this behavior is straight up unacceptable, especially for people who consider themselves followers of Jesus Christ.
Wow, he's really setting a high bar here.
He is. And that kind of made me wonder, is he saying that just being like a good person isn't enough? Like you actually have to go above and beyond to create peace?
That's an interesting question. What do you think?
Well, I think he's pointing out there's a difference between like just avoiding bad actions
Yeah.
and then actively choosing to be a peacemaker. It's like embodying that radical love and forgiveness that Jesus taught.
Oh, yeah. Like turning the other cheek and loving your enemies, all of that.
Exactly. And that really got me thinking, he chose to deliver this speech on Palm Sunday.
Oh, wow. So just a couple of days before Easter.
Yes. And I feel like he's very deliberately weaving this message of peacemaking into the core of Christian faith, connecting it back to Christ's sacrifice and the idea of new beginnings.
No, that's so insightful. It's like he's saying, look, if we're truly going to follow Christ's example, then peacemaking can't just be a nice idea that we think about sometimes. It needs to be like a way of life.
That's a really good way to put it. And then he drops this bombshell.
Okay, what is it?
Contention is evil.
Wow, he doesn't mince words, does he?
No, not at all.
I love it. That is so powerful.
And then what makes it even more powerful is he connects it directly to Satan. He's arguing that by giving into contention, we're basically playing right into Satan's hands. He quotes that scripture that says, "No man can serve two masters."
Yeah, meaning you can't be on the side of peace and conflict at the same time. You have to choose.
Exactly. So it's like he's saying you have to make a choice. And it's not about ignoring the problem or pretending everything's fine.
No, not at all. It's about shifting our approach,
Right.
rejecting those patterns of behavior that just create more negativity and conflict.
Totally. Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
But how do we actually do that? It's easy to just say, be a peacemaker.
Yeah, it's a lot harder to actually put it into practice.
Especially when our emotions are high.
For sure. Well, he does offer some practical advice. He talks about using uplifting language, even when you disagree with someone.
Oh, interesting.
So instead of just criticizing or judging right away, he suggests offering support, especially for people who are going through a hard time.
So it's about choosing those words that build people up instead of tearing them down.
Right.
And, I think it's really important to remember that we can still show people respect and kindness even when we don't agree with them.
Exactly. It's not about always agreeing or pretending that everything is fine.
It's about how we approach those disagreements.
Yeah. And being willing to listen and try to understand where the other person is coming from.
Right. And he actually uses his own working relationship with his counselors as an example.
Really?
Yeah, he talks about how they managed to discuss these difficult issues and still maintain a sense of mutual respect. So it is possible to disagree without being disagreeable.
Oh, that's encouraging to hear.
It is. And this is where he introduces this idea of charity, which he calls the antidote to contention. And it's the spiritual gift that helps us overcome our own selfishness and pride, which often are at the root of these conflicts, right?
Okay, so how does charity, this antidote, play out in real life? What does that actually look like?
Well, I think he sees it as the purest form of love. The kind that's patient, kind, humble, and forgiving. It's prioritizing the needs of others, even when it's hard, and extending grace, even when you don't feel like it's deserved.
Yeah, that's a beautiful way to put it. So it's not about being a doormat
No.
or letting people walk all over you.
No.
It's about approaching every interaction with a certain mindset, a certain intentionality, like your heart is filled with understanding and compassion.
Exactly. And he really encourages us to pray for this gift of charity, especially when we're struggling. He talks about looking for ways to bear each other's burdens, offering support and encouragement instead of judgment. And he even uses this phrase, being a witness of God. And I don't know about you, but that sounds a little intense to me.
I know, right? Like, what does that even mean? Does he mean, like, literally?
I know, right? But I think he's talking about aligning our actions with Christ's teachings. Even when we're facing opposition or we're under pressure, it's about choosing kindness, even when the people around us are choosing conflict.
Oh, that makes sense.
And he's not saying it's easy, though.
It sounds really challenging, actually.
And I think that's what a lot of listeners are probably thinking right now, right? Like, oh yeah, so-and-so definitely needs to hear this. But he takes it a step further, and he's like, no, look inward. Are we harboring any pride or jealousy that might be getting in the way of our own peacemaking efforts?
Oh, that's good. It's so easy to point fingers at other people, right?
It is.
It's much harder to look at our own behavior.
Totally. And it's about recognizing that we all have room to grow. We all have those moments where our pride or our ego, get in the way of peace.
For sure.
And if we really want to be effective peacemakers in the world, then we have to start by creating peace within ourselves.
Okay, so how do we actually do that? How do we get started on this inner work of peacemaking?
Well, he gives some really concrete advice. He talks about letting go of bitterness, practicing flexibility, and then fostering safe spaces for people to share what they're thinking and feeling.
Oh, that's so important.
Even if their thoughts and feelings are different from ours.
Absolutely. Creating an environment where people feel safe to express themselves without fear of judgment.
Right. And then he uses this phrase, putting away our weapons of war. What comes to mind when you hear that phrase?
I think of those verbal attacks we were talking about earlier, like, the insults, the accusations.
Totally.
That constant need to be right, even if it means putting someone else down in the process. It's like we're using our words to wound people instead of trying to understand them.
Exactly. And he's calling us to disarm, to trade those weapons in for tools of peace, and to choose understanding over animosity. And then he brings in this concept of the temple, which is a sacred space for members of his faith.
Oh, interesting.
And he talks about it as a place where individuals can receive strength to overcome negativity and contention.
So it's like he's saying that we can tap into this spiritual power, whatever form it takes for each individual, and then bring that same energy into our relationships and interactions.
That's a great way to put it. And each time we successfully navigate a conflict, each time we choose forgiveness over anger, it's a small victory, against that negativity. And it's a step toward creating a more peaceful world.
I love that image. It's like those small victories adding up over time.
Exactly, like ripples spreading outward.
Yeah, creating those positive changes that extend beyond just ourselves.
Totally. He talks about being a light on the hill, inspiring other people to do the same. It's about showing that a different way is possible.
So it's not just about our own personal growth, right? It's about having a positive impact on the world around us, inspiring others to embrace peace as well.
Exactly. And what I think is so beautiful about this message is that it's ultimately inclusive. He emphasizes that God's invitation is open to everyone,
Hmm.
regardless of your background or your
So
beliefs.
it's not about converting people to a specific religion, it's about creating a more loving and accepting world for everyone.
Exactly. And he's very clear that this kind of unity can't exist if we're still holding on to prejudice and condemnation.
That makes sense. You can't really build bridges if you're still holding on to the things that divide you.
Right. So he's challenging us to look at our own hearts, to root out any prejudice that we might be holding on to, and then actively work to create a more inclusive world.
That's a powerful message.
It is. And it might sound daunting, but ultimately it's a message of hope and empowerment.
Because he's reminding us that we all have the power to choose peace.
We can all be peacemakers and make a difference, even if it seems small. That's a pretty amazing thought, isn't it?
It really is. It's like he's saying that peace isn't just this lofty ideal, it's something that we can actually build day by day, interaction by interaction.
So it's not about hoping for a more peaceful world. It's about being the change that we want to see.
Exactly. And that change starts with each of us taking a long, hard look at our own behavior. He actually poses this challenge to his listeners. Examine your discipleship within the context of the way you treat others. It's about holding ourselves accountable, really looking to see if our actions are matching up with the values of peace and compassion that we say we care about.
That's really powerful because it's so easy to point our fingers at other people and say they need to be more peaceful. But he's really turning the focus inward, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Asking us to consider how we're contributing to the conflict.
And he's not just talking about the big dramatic things. It's about all those little everyday choices.
Like the tone we use when we're frustrated, or the words we choose when we disagree, even the thoughts that we allow ourselves to dwell on.
Exactly. And he paints this beautiful picture of replacing belligerence with beseeching, animosity with understanding, and contention with peace. It's like this vision of a world that's been transformed by understanding and kindness,
Yeah.
where those harsh, reactive responses are replaced with something gentler and more constructive.
Oh, that's beautiful.
Yeah.
But let's be honest, this stuff is hard work.
Yeah.
Like changing those ingrained patterns of behavior. Choosing peace when our gut reaction is to fight back, it doesn't come naturally.
No, it definitely takes effort. But I think it's important to remember that we're not alone in this.
That's true.
He believes that God is there to support us, to provide the strength and the guidance that we need to become peacemakers.
And he doesn't just leave us with vague promises, right? He gives us specific things that we can do to start cultivating that spirit of peacemaking.
Oh, yeah. Like what?
So he talks about the importance of prayer, turning to a higher power for help in overcoming those tendencies that lead to conflict.
Yeah.
It's like acknowledging that we don't always have all the answers
Yeah.
and that sometimes we need a little help to break free from those old patterns of behavior.
Right. He also talks about forgiveness, too.
Oh, yeah.
Forgiving ourselves for our mistakes and also forgiving other people for the ways they've hurt us.
Which is hard,
Yeah.
especially when we've been really deeply wounded.
Oh, it can be incredibly difficult. But I think what he's saying is that forgiveness is ultimately a gift that we give ourselves. It frees us from carrying all that anger and resentment. It allows us to move on and create space for healing.
Totally. And he even uses this phrase, casting out Satan. And I don't know about you, but that sounds a little intense to me.
Yeah, like, is he talking about actual demons here? What's going on?
Right. But I think what he's getting at is that peacemaking have the power to overcome those negative forces that can take root in our lives and relationships.
So maybe not literal demons.
Right.
But there are definitely things that can be just as destructive.
Absolutely. Like pride, jealousy, fear, all those things that can lead to conflict.
It's like we have to choose to feed the good wolf, not the bad wolves.
Oh, I love that analogy. And, he's not just talking about our own personal transformation. He's also talking about transforming the world. He keeps using that image of being a light on the hill, showing others that a different way of being is possible.
It's like leading by example, proving that peacemaking is a powerful force that can actually make a real difference.
And all those small acts of peacemaking, when you multiply them across individuals, it can really shift the dynamic of our whole society.
Okay, now I'm starting to see how this goes beyond just individual behavior. It can start to impact the systems around us.
Right. He talks about gathering Israel, which is a complex concept within his faith. But if we look at it from a broader perspective, I think what he's getting at is the idea of creating a more unified world.
So it's not about converting people to a specific religion.
Right.
It's about creating a sense of belonging and shared purpose
Yeah.
that goes beyond those kinds of divisions.
Exactly. And he emphasizes that that kind of unity can only exist if we let go of prejudice and condemnation.
It makes sense. You can't truly be unified if you're still judging and condemning other people.
He's challenging us to move beyond those us versus them mentalities that create so much conflict in the world.
It's about recognizing our shared humanity.
Exactly. And he's saying that this is an active process, not a passive one. We have to reach out to people who are different from us, build those bridges of understanding, create a world where everyone feels welcome.
It sounds like he's saying that peacemaking isn't just about what we don't do, it's about what we actively do to create a more just and harmonious world.
Exactly. And it's not just about warm, fuzzy feelings. It's about creating real change in the world around us.
Yeah, like advocating for policies that promote equality and justice,
Right.
or supporting organizations that are working to build peace, and speaking up when we see injustice happening.
Exactly. Putting those principles into action.
On a larger scale.
And, I think it's really important to remember that those small acts of compassion and kindness can make a huge difference.
It's true. Like, think about that saying, a single candle can illuminate the darkness.
That's beautiful.
We all have the power to bring more light into the world.
And peace is contagious, right?
Okay.
Like when we choose peace, we make it easier for other people to do the same.
Oh, absolutely. And that's how we can start to change the world, one act of peacemaking at a time.
It's amazing to think about the ripple effect that our actions can have.
It really is. It's like we might not always see the impact right away, but it's definitely there.
Totally. And as we move into the last part of our deep dive, I really want to focus on how we can take these big ideas about peacemaking and make them concrete. What are those specific actions we can take to become peacemakers in our own little corner of the world?
I love that because it's one thing to talk about all these principles, but it's another thing to actually put them into practice in our daily lives.
Exactly. So for all of you listening, I hope you'll stick with us as we explore the practical side of peacemaking. What can we do right now to make a difference?
I can't wait to dive into that.
All right, so we've explored the why of peacemaking.
Yeah.
Now, let's get down to the how.
Yeah.
If we want to make peace a reality in our own lives, like where do we even begin?
Well, I think it's important to remember that it's a process. It's not like a one-time fix. It's something that we have to work at consistently.
It's a journey.
Yeah, exactly. He talks about burying our weapons of war. And no, he's not suggesting we go and like literally bury things in our backyard.
That's what I was picturing. A whole bunch of shovels and weapons, and I don't even know what else buried in backyard.
I know, right? It's a funny image. But what he means is those ingrained patterns of behavior, right?
Oh, okay.
Those things that we do, to put other people down or to make ourselves feel better at their expense.
Oh, like those cutting remarks.
Yeah.
Or, those passive-aggressive little digs that we do when we're feeling insecure or threatened.
Exactly. It's easy to slip into those patterns, especially when we're not feeling our best.
Yeah.
But he's challenging us to disarm.
To let go of those weapons.
Yeah, and replace them with something more constructive.
So it's not just about avoiding conflict. It's about actively replacing those destructive habits with more positive ones.
Right. Like trading in our weapons for a peacemaker's toolkit.
Yeah.
One that's filled with empathy and compassion and understanding.
Ooh, I love that visual. Like
Yeah.
swapping out those weapons for tools that will actually help us build better relationships.
Exactly. It's a total shift in perspective, right? Instead of approaching every interaction like it's a battle to be won, we start seeing them as opportunities to create something better.
That's really beautiful. Okay, so that's like the internal work. But what about the external stuff? How do we take those tools and actually use them in the world around us?
He talks about being a light on the hill, letting our actions do the talking. It's about demonstrating peacemaking in a way that inspires other people to do the same.
So leading by example.
Yeah.
Showing that there's a different way to relate to each other.
Exactly. And this can look like a lot of different things. It could be as simple as speaking up when you see injustice happening.
Or reaching out to someone who's being marginalized.
Right. Or it could be something more organized, like volunteering for a cause you believe in.
Supporting organizations that are doing peace-building work.
Huh.
Advocating for policies that promote justice.
Exactly. It's about finding ways to put those principles into action in a way that creates real change in the world.
And it's important to remember that even those small acts of kindness, they can make a difference. Like that saying, a single candle can illuminate the darkness. We each have the power to bring more light into the world.
I love that because it's so true. Peace is contagious. When we choose peace, it makes it easier for other people to do the same. And that's how we can change the world, one act of peacemaking at a time.
I love that. So inspiring to think about the ripple effect that our actions can have. And President Nelson talks about this concept of gathering Israel, which, for those who may not know, is, well, it's a pretty complex concept within his faith.
Yeah, it has a lot of theological layers to it.
It does, but I think there's a bigger takeaway here, something that resonates with everybody, no matter what you believe.
Okay, I'm curious, what do you think that is?
He's talking about creating a sense of belonging, building a community where everyone feels welcome and valued, no matter who they are or what they believe. It's about breaking down those barriers that separate us and recognizing that we're all part of the human family.
It's like that saying, we might have all come on different ships, but we're all in the same boat now.
Oh, I love that. That really captures the heart of what he's talking about. And he really emphasizes that that kind of unity requires us to reject prejudice and condemnation. We have to be willing to embrace diversity and see the inherent worth of every individual.
So it's not about just being nice to people we like. It's about extending that same kindness and respect to everyone, even people we disagree with.
Right. And it's about building those bridges of understanding and connection.
It's about recognizing that we're all interconnected, that we all have something unique and valuable to offer. And, he believes that this gathering isn't just a human effort, it's part of this bigger divine plan for the world.
So we're working in partnership with something bigger than ourselves to create a more peaceful and unified world.
Exactly. And I think that can be a source of tremendous strength and inspiration for all of us.
Absolutely. Because it reminds us that we're not alone in this work. We're all part of this larger movement toward peace that's been going on for a really long time.
And that's a powerful thing to remember, especially when the world feels kind of crazy and overwhelming.
It is. It reminds us there's hope. So as we wrap up this part of our deep dive, I want to leave you with this thought. He says, the best is yet to come for those who spend their lives building up others.
Oh, that's beautiful and so true.
It is. It's about who we are. It's about becoming those people who radiate kindness and prioritize understanding, and who work really hard to make the world a more loving and compassionate place.
It's about recognizing that we all have the power to make a difference, no matter how small it may seem. And that when we come together, all those little acts of peacemaking, they have the power to create something truly extraordinary.
That's amazing.
It is. So let's go out there and be peacemakers. The world needs it more than ever.
I agree. All right, so we've talked about the why of peacemaking.
Yeah, we've covered a lot of ground.
Now, let's get down to that how. What do we actually do to make peace a reality in our own lives? Where do we begin?
Well, I think one of the most important things to remember is that it's a journey. It's not about achieving some kind of perfect state of peace all the time.
It's not a destination.
Right, exactly. It's about those daily choices that we make, about showing up as the best versions of ourselves, even when it's hard.
Yeah, it's the practice.
It's the practice. He talks about burying our weapons of war, which of course he doesn't mean literally.
I know. I was picturing everyone going out and digging holes in their backyard.
Right. But what he means is letting go of those harmful patterns of behavior.
Okay, so what does that look like in practice? What are those weapons of war?
Well, think about it. Those cutting remarks, those little digs, those ways that we try to make ourselves feel better by putting other people down.
Oh, yeah, I think we've all been there.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. It's easy to fall into those traps, especially when we're feeling insecure or threatened. But he's challenging us to choose a different path.
To disarm.
Right, to replace those weapons with something more constructive.
So it's not just about avoiding conflict, it's about replacing those destructive patterns with more positive ones.
Exactly. Like, what if we traded in our weapons for a peacemaker's toolkit? One that's filled with kindness and understanding and compassion.
Ooh, I love that. Like swapping out those weapons for tools that actually help us build relationships and connect with people on a deeper level.
Exactly. It's a total shift in perspective. Instead of seeing every interaction as like a battle to be won, we start approaching them with curiosity and a willingness to learn.
That's beautiful. Okay, so that's the internal work. But what are the external stuff? How do we take those peacemaking tools and actually use them to make a difference in the world around us?
Well, he talks about being a light on the hill, letting our actions speak louder than our words.
So leading by example, showing people that there's another way to be.
Exactly. And this can take so many forms. It could be as simple as speaking up when you see injustice happening, or reaching out to someone who's being marginalized or excluded.
Or it could be more organized efforts, like volunteering our time, supporting organizations that are building peace, or advocating for policies that promote justice.
Exactly. It's about finding ways to put those peacemaking principles into action in a way that creates real change.
And it's important to remember that even those seemingly small acts of kindness and compassion can have a ripple effect. Like there's that saying, a single candle can illuminate the darkness.
Oh, I love that. It's so true.
It is. We each have the power to bring more light into the world.
And you know, peace is contagious. When we choose peace, it makes it easier for other people to do the same. And that's how we start to transform the world, one act of peacemaking at a time.
I love that image of peace being contagious. And President Nelson talked about this idea of gathering Israel, which is, a pretty complex concept within his faith.
Yeah, it has a lot of theological depth.
It does. But I think there's a broader takeaway here that resonates with everyone, regardless of your beliefs.
Okay, I'm intrigued. What do you think that is?
He's talking about creating a sense of belonging, a community where everyone feels welcome and valued, no matter their background or beliefs. It's about breaking down those barriers that separate us and recognizing our shared humanity.
It's like that saying, we may have all come on different ships, but we're in the same boat now.
Oh, I love that. That really captures the essence of what he's talking about. And he emphasizes that this kind of unity requires us to reject prejudice and condemnation. We have to be willing to embrace diversity and see the inherent worth of every individual.
So it's not just about being nice to the people we like or agree with. It's about extending that same kindness and respect to everyone.
Exactly. And it's about building those bridges of understanding and connection.
It's about recognizing that we're all interconnected, that we all have something unique and valuable to offer. And, he believes that this gathering isn't just a human effort, it's part of this larger divine plan for the world.
So we're working in partnership with something bigger than ourselves to create a more peaceful and unified world.
Exactly. And I think that can be a source of tremendous strength and inspiration, especially when we're facing challenges.
Absolutely, because it reminds us that we're not alone in this work. We're part of a larger movement toward peace and unity that's been unfolding for centuries.
And that's a really powerful thought to hold on to, isn't it?
It is. So as we wrap up this part of our deep dive, I want to leave you with this thought. He says, the best is yet to come for those who spend their lives building up others.
Oh, that's beautiful.
It really is.
It really is. It's like he's saying peace isn't just something we wish for, it's something we can actively build.
So it's not just about hoping for a better world. It's about actually being that change.
Yeah. And that change starts with us, like really taking a good look at how we're acting.
Ooh, self-reflection time. Always fun.
I know, right? But he actually says to his listeners, examine your discipleship within the context of how you treat others.
Whoa. Okay, so he's calling us out, making us look at ourselves, and if we're actually living up to those values of peace and compassion we talk about.
It's so easy to point fingers at everyone else.
Right. Like, oh, they need to be more peaceful. But he's saying, nope, look at yourself.
See how you're contributing to the problem. And he's not even just talking about the big stuff. It's the little everyday choices, too.
Like, what tone am I using when I'm frustrated with someone?
Exactly. Or the words you use when you're disagreeing with somebody.
Or even just the thoughts you're letting yourself have.
Totally.
Mhm.
He actually uses this amazing phrase. He says to replace belligerence with beseeching, animosity with understanding, and contention with peace.
Okay, wow, those are some powerful words. It's like he's painting this picture of a completely different world.
Where everything is just kinder and gentler and more constructive.
Oh, that sounds amazing. But honestly, this all sounds like really hard work. Like actually changing how you react in the moment, it's tough.
Oh, totally. But luckily, we don't have to do it alone.
Right, there's that.
He reminds us that, God's there to help us, to give us the strength we need to become these peacemakers.
And I love that he doesn't just stop at the promises, right?
Yeah.
He gives us real practical things we can do to actually cultivate peacemaking in our lives.
Yeah, he gets down to the nitty-gritty.
So one of the things he emphasizes is prayer. Like turning to a higher power for help in overcoming those negative tendencies we've been talking about. It's like admitting we don't have all the answers.
Oh, yeah. Humility is huge in this whole thing.
Right. And sometimes you just need a little bit of help to break those old patterns.
Oh, for sure. And another big one he talks about is forgiveness. Forgiving yourself for your own mess-ups. and then forgiving others for the ways they've hurt us.
Oh, man, forgiveness. That's a tough one.
I know, right? Especially when you've been through something really painful.
It's so hard to let go sometimes.
It is, but what I think he's trying to say is that forgiveness is really a gift we give ourselves. It stops us from being weighed down by that anger and resentment.
So we can actually move on and start to heal.
Exactly. Oh, and there's this one part he actually says, casting out Satan. And I don't know about you, but
Oh my gosh, yes.
intense. Like, is he being literal here?
Like, are there demons involved? What's happening?
I think he's getting at the idea that choosing peace is like this powerful force. It can overcome those negative things that take root in our lives.
So maybe not actual demons,
Right, exactly.
but there are definitely things that can be just as destructive.
Oh, totally. Like, think about pride, jealousy, feeding.
All those things that lead to conflict.
Yeah, it's like instead of feeding that bad wolf, we choose to feed the good wolf.
Ooh, I love that. I'm totally stealing that analogy. And I love that he's not just focused on, like, our personal growth. He's also talking about how peacemaking can actually transform the world. He keeps coming back to that image of being a light on the hill, right?
It's like showing people that another way is possible.
Inspiring them by our own example.
Exactly. And when you think about it, all those little individual acts of peacemaking, if enough people are doing them, they can actually start to change the whole dynamic of our society.
Wow, yeah. Okay, now I'm seeing how this goes way beyond just individual actions.
Yeah.
You can actually start to impact systems and structures, yeah, for sure.
Right. He talks about this concept of gathering Israel, which is obviously rooted in his faith tradition. But I think if we zoom out a bit, there's a broader takeaway here.
Yeah, there's something universal there.
Like, he's really talking about creating a more inclusive and unified world, not about converting people to a specific religion, but about building a sense of belonging that goes beyond those kinds of divisions.
And he's very clear that this unity can only happen if we ditch the prejudice and judgment.
Totally. You can't be unified while you're still busy judging and condemning people.
Right. It's about moving past those us versus them mentalities that cause so much conflict.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that we're all connected, that we all have something unique and valuable to contribute. And he believes that this gathering, this process of creating unity, it's not just a human effort. It's part of a larger divine plan for the world.
So we're working in partnership with something bigger than ourselves to create a more peaceful world.
Exactly. And I think that's a really powerful and inspiring thought to hold on to.
It is. It gives me hope, especially when things feel so chaotic. So as we wrap up this part of our deep dive, I want to leave you with this thought. He says, the best is yet to come for those who spend their lives building up others.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. That's beautiful. It's about becoming the kind of people who radiate kindness, who choose understanding, who work hard to make the world a more loving place.
And remembering that each of us has the power to be a peacemaker, to make a difference, even if it seems small.
Right. And when we all come together, all those little acts of peacemaking, they have the power to create something truly extraordinary.
That's amazing. Gives me chills to think about it. So let's go be peacemakers. The world needs us now more than ever. About becoming those people who radiate kindness, who choose understanding, who work hard to make the world a more loving place.
It really is. And remembering that we all have the power to be a peacemaker, no matter how small.
And that when we all come together, those individual acts of peacemaking, they have the power to create something really amazing.
Absolutely. So let's go out there and be those peacemakers. Like, the world really needs it right now.
It really does. All right, so we've talked about the reasons behind peacemaking, the why.
Yeah, for sure. We've talked a lot about that.
But now let's get to the how.
Yeah.
Like, what do we actually do to make peace happen in our own lives?
Yeah.
Where do we even start?
Well, I think it's important to remember that it's not about, like, reaching some perfect state of peace all the time.
Oh, right. It's not like a destination.
Yeah, exactly. It's a journey. And it's about the everyday choices we make. You know, just trying to show up as the best versions of ourselves, even when it's hard.
So it's like a practice.
It is. It's a practice. He talks about burying our weapons of war. And of course, he doesn't mean we should, like, go dig a hole in our backyards.
That's what I was picturing. Like, everyone's running around with shovels, burying stuff.
Right. It's a funny thought, but what he really means is letting go of those bad habits. You know, the ones that hurt other people.
Okay, so, like, what would those be? Those weapons of war?
Well, you know, those little cutting remarks, those digs that we throw at people, those times when we try to make ourselves feel better by putting other people down.
Oh, yeah. I think we've all been there.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
It's easy to fall into those traps when you're not feeling so great about yourself. But he's saying we have to choose a different path.
So we have to disarm.
Yes, and try to replace those weapons with something better, something positive.
Okay, so it's not just about avoiding conflict. It's about actually replacing those bad habits with good ones.
Yeah. Like, imagine trading those weapons in for a peacemaker's toolkit, one that's full of compassion and understanding, things like that.
Oh, I love that. It's like swapping those weapons out for tools that will help us build real connections with people.
Exactly. It's a total shift in how we look at things. Instead of approaching every interaction like a competition, we approach it with an open mind and a willingness to learn.
That's so powerful. Okay, so we've talked about the internal stuff, but what about the external? How do we take those tools and use them out in the world?
Well, he talks a lot about being a light on the hill, letting our actions speak for themselves. It's about showing people what peacemaking really looks like.
So, like leading by example,
Hmm.
proving that there's a different way to interact with each other.
Exactly. And this can look so many different ways. Like, it could be speaking up when you see something unjust happening, or it could be reaching out to someone who's being left out.
Or it could be like getting involved in organizations that are working to create peace. Or maybe advocating for policies that make things more fair.
Yeah, all of that. It's about finding ways to put those peacemaking ideas into practice and make a real difference in the world.
And you know what? I think it's important to remember that even those little acts of kindness, they matter. Like there's that saying, a single candle can light up the darkness.
Oh, I love that. And it's so true.
We each have the power to make things a little bit brighter.
We really do. And the beautiful thing is, peace is contagious. Like, when we choose peace, it makes it easier for others to do the same. And that's how we can start to change the world bit by bit.
I love that. It's like a ripple effect. President Nelson talks about gathering Israel, which I know is a really complex concept within his faith.
Yeah, it's super deep theologically.
But I think there's this bigger takeaway here, something that speaks to everyone, no matter what they believe.
What's that?
He's talking about creating a sense of belonging, like building a community where everybody feels valued and welcome, regardless of where they come from or what they believe. It's about seeing past those differences and recognizing that we're all part of the same human family.
Oh, it's like that saying, we might have all come on different ships, but we're all in the same boat now.
Yes, I love that.
Yeah.
That's exactly what he's talking about. And he makes it clear that to have that kind of unity, we have to drop the prejudice and condemnation. We have to embrace diversity.
Oh, absolutely. Like, you can't really be unified if you're still judging and condemning people.
Right. It's about letting go of those us versus them ideas that cause so much conflict.
It's about recognizing that we're all connected, that we all have something to offer. And you know what? He believes that this whole gathering process, this creating unity, it's not just a human effort. It's part of something bigger.
So we're working with something larger than ourselves to bring about peace.
Exactly. And I think that's an incredibly powerful and inspiring thought to hold on to.
It is. It really gives me hope. So as we wrap up this deep dive, I just want to leave everyone with this thought. He says, the best is yet to come for those who spend their lives building up others.
Oh, that's so beautiful. And it's so true. It's not just about what we do. It's about who we become.
Right. It's about becoming those people who radiate kindness and who see the best in others, and who work really hard to make the world a more loving place.
Exactly. It's about realizing that every single one of us has the power to make a difference, even in small ways. And that when we all work together, all those small acts of kindness and peace, they can build up to something truly incredible.
I love that. So let's all go out there and be peacemakers. The world needs it now more than ever.
I couldn't agree more.